This story isn't just about violence, it's about vulnerability. Chloe has spent her entire life fighting her own body, invisible to the world around her. But on this train, she becomes the target of something far bigger. What makes this story powerful is not just the danger, it's the moment she realizes she isn't weak, and that the strength others failed to see is exactly what made her worth protecting.
With a sudden lurch of the train, intense pain shot up Chloe's legs, and she collapsed into the only empty seat. She sat beside a man with a scarred face and a massive German shepherd. Most service animals didn't give her a second look. But this dog was different. His amber eyes were locked on her with a shocking focus. He looked ready to protect her from the whole chaotic Friday night crowd at Penn Station. For Chloe Rollins, this entire trip was a complete nightmare. At just 24 years old, her life revolved around one surgery after another for a tethered spinal cord. Heavy titanium crutches and leg braces were the only things holding her up. Every step was a fight against pain and gravity, and today she was losing that fight. The station's air smelled awful, like old pretzels, car exhaust, and the stress of 10,000 people all trying to leave the city. All she wanted was to be on her 5:15 in the evening train to Boston. When boarding was finally called, the crowd surged forward like one giant wave, shoving Chloe aside as if she were invisible. No one was trying to be mean. They just were not paying attention. In a city this big, a girl with a limp is just another thing to get around. A businessman in a fancy suit knocked into her, sending a jolt of pure agony up her spine. By the time she made it onto the train, it was completely full. People blocked the aisle seats with expensive bags and coats, staring at their phones to avoid looking at her. Chloe fought her way down the aisle, the clacking of her crutches echoing through the quiet car. She could almost feel the annoyed sighs from the other passengers. Her arms trembled from the effort. She knew if she did not sit down in the next minute, her legs would give out. Then, at the very end of the car, she saw it. One single, open aisle seat. As she got closer, she saw why it was still free. The man in the window seat looked like he was made of stone, wearing a dark jacket and a black baseball cap pulled down over his eyes. A light pink scar ran from his ear down to the collar of his shirt. He was perfectly still with his eyes closed, but he seemed tense, like a tightly wound spring. That was not the reason people were staying away, though. On the floor beside him sat a 90-pound German shepherd. This was no ordinary dog. It wore a tough harness with a patch that read, "Do not pet." It looked more like a wolf from the military than a family pet. Chloe paused for a moment. The train's horn blew loudly, announcing it was about to leave. A tremor ran through her weak leg. She had to sit. Holding her crutches tightly, she moved closer. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice shaking a little. The man's eyes snapped open. They were a sharp, cold gray. He looked her over, taking in her tired face, her tight grip on the crutches, and the heavy braces on her legs. He did not smile or say hello. "Is this seat taken?" Chloe asked in a whisper. The man studied her for another long second before giving one quick, sharp nod. He did not say a word. Instead, he gave the dog a small, silent hand signal. The German shepherd immediately and silently moved. It pressed itself against the man's legs, making just enough room for Chloe. "Thank you," she said with a sigh of relief as she sank into the seat. She leaned her crutches against the wall and closed her eyes as the train began to move. She focused on taking slow breaths, hoping the pain in her back would ease up. The man next to her remained completely still. His name was Jackson Reynolds, and he was not just a veteran. He was a retired operator from the very elite SEAL Team 6. Jackson had spent the last 14 years in the most dangerous places on Earth. He had survived gunfights in mountains and rescued hostages from thick jungles. The dog at his feet, Havoc, was not with him for emotional support. Havoc was a military working dog trained for many things. He could find explosives, track enemies, and attack when ordered. He had jumped out of airplanes with Jackson and had saved his life more times than he could remember. Havoc was trained to ignore everything that was not a clear threat. He paid no attention to noises, food, or other people. That is why what happened next sent a chill of dread through Jackson. The train picked up speed, leaving the dark tunnels and moving into the afternoon sunlight. Chloe shifted in her seat, and a sudden cramp in her leg made her brace clang against the seat. She gasped and bit her lip, trying to pretend she was not in pain. She hated looking weak in front of anyone. Down on the floor, Havoc's ears shot straight up. Jackson watched the dog out of the corner of his eye. Havoc's training was to always stay down. That command was burned into his brain. But for the first time ever, Havoc did not obey that command. The huge German shepherd slowly and silently got to his feet. Jackson tensed up, his hand moving toward the hidden Sig Sauer P365 he always carried. Havoc would only break a direct order if he sensed a deadly threat. But the dog was not looking for a bomb or a hidden weapon. Instead, all of his attention was on Chloe. She froze as the 90-pound animal began to move toward her lap. His jaws were powerful enough to break bone. She held her breath, too scared to even move. Jackson opened his mouth to give a sharp order, but the word got stuck in his throat. Havoc was not growling or showing any teeth. He was doing something Jackson had never seen him do in 6 years of service. The dog very gently rested his heavy chin on Chloe's shaking, braced leg. Chloe let out a quiet gasp of surprise. Havoc gave a long, soft sigh. He looked up at her with his serious, amber eyes. Then he carefully moved into the small space between her and the aisle, sitting up straight like a guard. The dog was a living shield, protecting this fragile woman from everyone around them. He's protecting her, Jackson realized in pure astonishment. "I am so sorry," Chloe whispered. Her hands hesitated above the dog's head, unsure if a touch was welcome. "Will he be okay?" Jackson finally turned and truly looked at her. He saw the bone-deep weariness in her face and the gentle shake in her hands. He saw Havoc scanning the area like a sentry on duty. "He is fine," Jackson answered. His voice was low and rough, shaped by years of yelling over loud engines. "It is just that he has never done this." "Done what?" Chloe asked gently, finally stroking the thick fur on Havoc's head. The dog pressed into her hand, which made Jackson's jaw drop. "He is a military K9, Jackson explained quietly. "He is trained to find explosives, not to give comfort. He does not approach people." Chloe looked down at the giant dog who had made a pillow out of her leg. So why was this expertly trained dog acting this way? Jackson's brow wrinkled as his eyes swept over the train car. 15 years of survival training in the most dangerous places in the world took over. Havoc was not just being nice. Dogs like him can sense chemical changes in people. They can smell fear, adrenaline, and bad intentions. The dog knew that Chloe was in a vulnerable state. But more than that, Havoc had placed himself as a guard, blocking her from the aisle. He was protecting her. Jackson's sharp eyes scanned the passengers ahead. An older couple was napping in row 12. In row 13, a college kid with headphones was typing quickly on a laptop. A mother in row 14 entertained her toddler with an iPad. Then his eyes locked on row 15, on a man wearing an expensive navy blue suit. Jackson's attention narrowed in on this man. His name was Simon Miller, but Jackson did not know that. Simon looked completely normal. He had neat brown hair, expensive glasses, and a leather briefcase on his lap. To anyone else, he was just another businessman going home. But Jackson was not anyone else. He saw the small, strange details immediately. Simon was in an aisle seat, but sat at a weird angle. He held a magazine in his hands, but had not turned a page in the last 10 minutes. The biggest clue was how he was using the dark reflection in the train window. He was not looking at the scenery outside. He was watching the reflection of the inside of the car. Specifically, he was watching the reflection of the last row. He was watching Chloe. Jackson saw Simon's eyes follow Chloe's reflection in the glass. The man's jaw was tight. He placed a hand inside his suit jacket, left it there for a second, and then pulled it out. It could have been a nervous habit, or he could have been checking for a weapon. Then, Havoc made a sound. It was not a bark. It was a deep, low growl that seemed to vibrate through the floor. It was a sound Jackson knew instantly. It was the sound Havoc made just before they would enter a building full of hostiles. "What is wrong with him?" Chloe whispered, pulling her hand away as she felt the dog's muscles tense up. "Nothing," Jackson said, his voice becoming dangerously quiet. "He is just doing his job. Please, keep your hands in your lap and do not make any sudden moves." The feeling in the train car shifted from boring to electric. A heavy tension filled the air, and it felt thick and metallic. Jackson Reynolds sat perfectly still, his hands in his lap, looking calm but ready to move in a fraction of a second. Model. Chloe felt a deep sense of dread, but she could not understand the reason. The scarred man beside her was not a threat. He was actually the only one kind enough to offer her a seat. His dog looked intimidating, but now its weight felt warm and safe on her sore leg. Still, the atmosphere felt heavy with danger. "What's your name?" Jackson asked quietly, his eyes fixed on the man in the blue suit 3 rows ahead. "Chloe," she answered, her voice trembling slightly. "Chloe Rollins." "Jackson," he replied simply. "Now listen to me, Chloe. I do not mean to frighten you, but I need to ask you something. Did you notice anyone following you today? Maybe at the station?" Chloe's heart started to pound in her chest. The horrible journey through Penn Station was a painful blur. Her leg hurt so much she could only focus on moving one crutch at a time without falling. She kept her eyes on the floor and never looked at anyone directly. "No," she whispered, her voice shaking with fear. "No, I am on my way home to Boston from my doctor in Manhattan. What is happening?" "Do not look up," Jackson said. His tone was gentle but firm. "Just keep looking at the dog. It will help you stay calm if you pet him." Chloe did as she was told, burying her trembling hand in Havoc's thick fur. The dog's low growl rumbled steadily down the aisle. At that moment, Simon Miller stood up. He adjusted his suit jacket, grabbed his leather briefcase, and moved into the aisle. He did not walk toward the front of the train where the cafe was located. Instead, he turned and began walking slowly toward the back, directly toward where Jackson and Chloe were seated. Jackson watched every tiny detail of the man's behavior. Simon's walk was slightly unnatural. He tried to appear casual, but his body was rigid. He gripped the briefcase handle so tightly his knuckles turned white. His left hand, however, swung loose, just a bit too near his jacket pocket. Simon finally came to a stop right beside their row. He gazed down at them. Chloe felt his shadow cover her, and she could not stop herself from looking up. Simon had a handsome, ordinary face, but his eyes were entirely empty. They held none of the usual warmth or feeling of a person. They were like dark camera lenses, simply recording what they saw. "Are you having difficulty with those crutches?" Simon asked. His voice was smooth and educated, but it contained no genuine concern. It was a well-rehearsed opening question. Before Chloe could even respond, Havoc moved into action. The dog was completely silent. A bark is meant as a warning. Havoc was past giving warnings. The huge German shepherd launched himself forward, placing his 90-pound frame across Chloe's lap, and snapped his teeth with a loud crack just 3 inches from Simon Miller's leg. Simon jumped back in alarm, hitting the armrest across the aisle. His friendly expression vanished, replaced by a look of pure, cold rage. "Good heavens!" Simon shouted, acting like an alarmed passenger. "You need to control that dog!" "It nearly bit me." Jackson's voice remained level. He did not even get up. He just stared at Simon with eyes that had seen conflict before. "He did not try to bite you," Jackson stated, his voice clear and sharp over the train's noise. If he had, your femoral artery would be spraying the ceiling. He was just telling you to back away. That animal is a menace, Simon hissed, and he moved one step closer, his hand drifting toward his coat. I am going to find the conductor. Go ahead, take another step, Jackson said, his voice dangerously quiet. Reach inside that left pocket. I encourage you to do it. Just give me a reason. Simon froze in place. For 3 tense seconds, the two men stared at each other. Jackson had not shifted at all, but a palpable sense of danger flowed from him. Simon was a hunter, accustomed to tracking the vulnerable. He had targeted the girl on crutches because she seemed like a simple target. He saw that she was injured, alone, and struggling. But he had made a terrible error. He did not realize the quiet man with her was different. He had entered the domain of a much more serious predator. Simon glanced down toward Jackson's waist, where he saw the subtle shape of something beneath his jacket. He looked at Havoc, who was now displaying a full set of sharp, white teeth. Simon slowly put his hands up as if surrendering a false, unpleasant smile on his lips. Easy there, friend. I was only trying to be nice. He turned quickly and hurried toward the front of the train, vanishing through the sliding doors into the adjacent car. Chloe was struggling to breathe, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Who was that? Why was he... Just breathe, Chloe, Jackson said, finally looking away from the doors. He reached down to give Havoc a pat on the head. That is enough, boy. Good dog. Havoc instantly stopped growling but remained pressed against Chloe's legs, alert and ready. I have no idea who he is, Jackson said softly, his mind racing. But he was not going to the lavatory, and he was not interested in being friendly. Before Chloe could speak again, the train car was plunged into total darkness. The steady click-clack of the wheels turned into a deafening, horrifying scream of metal grinding against metal. Someone had activated the emergency brakes. The huge Acela Express train shook violently, sending luggage flying from overhead bins and flinging screaming passengers into the seats ahead of them. Jackson reacted with incredible speed. He released his seatbelt, lunged sideways, and pushed Chloe down into her seat, shielding her head and neck with his own body. Beneath them, Havoc dropped to the floor, covering Chloe's legs with his heavy form. The train crashed to a final, violent halt deep inside a dark tunnel. The emergency backup lights flickered on, filling the car with an eerie, pale yellow glow. Smoke and dust filled the air. Outside the window, there was only the black, wet brick of the tunnel wall. Are you okay? Jackson whispered, his face just inches from hers. Yes, she gasped, her entire body shaking uncontrollably. Jackson carefully moved back, his eyes scanning the chaos and fear around them. The glass doors at the front of the car had been shattered by the force of the stop. Jackson's voice was low and urgent. He said, "Do not leave this spot." His hand moved under his coat and closed around the handle of his pistol. "Stay in this seat. Havoc, guard." The dog gave a quiet whine of understanding and pressed even closer to Chloe. She felt a surge of panic and grabbed Jackson's arm, asking where he was going. Jackson simply stared at the shattered doors. He said in a low voice, "Trains do not just stop like this in a tunnel. Someone did this, and I am betting it was the man in the blue suit." The air was heavy with dust and the sharp, chemical odor of overheated brakes. Emergency lights cast a sickly yellow gleam on the terrified faces of the passengers. People were crying, and many were coughing from the dust. They started reaching for their cell phones, only to find what Jackson already suspected. They were far underneath the East River, in a tunnel. There was no service at all. They were stuck inside a long, sealed metal tube. Jackson made his way down the aisle with the quiet confidence of a trained hunter. His experience taught him how to operate in chaos, to ignore the panic screams and focus on the true danger. He pulled his Sig Sauer P5 from its holster, keeping it tucked close to his side, concealed by his jacket. He carefully stepped over a broken laptop and moved past a businessman who was hyperventilating on the floor. When he got to the smashed doors of their car, he saw the train conductor. His name tag identified him as Stanley Jenkins. The older man was slumped against the wall, holding a bleeding wound on his forehead. "Hey," Jackson said quietly, kneeling and putting a hand on the man's shoulder. "What happened back there? Who pulled the brake?" Stanley blinked, his vision blurred by the blood. "A guy in a blue suit pushed me down. Another man was waiting for him. A very large man, wearing a leather jacket. They broke open the emergency panel and pulled the handle. Then they jammed the doors leading to the forward cars." Jackson's mind quickly assembled the facts. 2 men. By blocking the doors ahead, they were not trying to hijack the entire train. They were isolating the rear cars. They were setting up a trap, a killing field. They were asking about security cameras. Stanley coughed, flinching from the pain. "They wanted to know if this section of the tunnel had cameras. I said no. And that is when they hit me." Jackson's jaw grew tight. This was not some random act of mayhem. It was a well-planned ambush, executed in a place where there would be no electronic witnesses. He gave Stanley's shoulder a firm squeeze. "Just stay here. Do not try to be a hero." Then, Jackson slipped into the dark space between the train cars. The loud hum of the tunnel's air system masked the sound of his movements. He looked through the scratched window of the next car forward. He saw them. Simon Miller had taken off his fancy suit coat. He was now wearing a black tactical shirt. He stood at the far end of the car, guarding the sealed door. But it was the other man, the one Stanley had described, that made the hair on Jackson's neck prickle. The man was built like a brick wall and wore a thick leather jacket and tactical gloves. His name was Roman Blackwood, a well-known specialist who took care of difficult situations with brutal efficiency. Roman was not just robbing people. He moved down the aisle, carefully studying each person's legs. Suddenly, Jackson thought of Chloe. He pictured her carbon fiber braces and special crutches. She said she was coming from a doctor's visit in the city. In that moment, it all made a terrible kind of sense. They were not after Chloe. They were after something she was carrying without a clue. The clinic must have hidden something valuable inside her medical gear. And these men, Simon and Roman, were here to pick it up. Roman shoved a scared teenager aside and headed for Chloe's car, thinking the girl on crutches would be easy. There was no time to make a plan. Jackson slipped into the dark space between the cars. He blended into the shadows, holding his breath. A heavy door creaked open. Roman stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light, completely unaware of the danger. The attack was swift and brutal. Jackson did not use his gun. A gunshot in the tunnel would alert Simon. Instead, he slammed his forearm into Roman's throat, pinning him against the steel wall. His right knee shot up, hitting a nerve and making Roman's leg go numb. Roman choked, struggling for air as his leg gave out. But he was a tough fighter. He swung a powerful elbow at Jackson's head. Jackson dodged it by an inch. He grabbed Roman's arm, twisting it back at a painful angle. A sickening sound of tearing muscle filled the small space. The large man fell, his face turning dark. Jackson leaned in, his whisper cold and sharp. "Tell me about the gear. What did the doctor hide in her braces?" Roman coughed blood and gasped. "You are done for. The drive, a prototype. It is in the titanium case." Jackson applied more pressure to the man's broken shoulder, making him groan in agony. "Who is Simon's boss?" Roman never had a chance to reply. A sharp click echoed from the other end of the passage. Jackson knew that sound. A 9mm handgun was being prepared to fire. Through the window, Simon was taking aim. Without a second thought, Jackson shoved Roman's body forward. He slammed into the door just as Simon fired. The blast was deafening, shattering the window into 1,000 pieces. The bullet struck Roman's body armor, and he collapsed to the floor. Jackson was already moving back, taking cover in Chloe's train car. This fight was not over yet. For Chloe, the world had become pure, terrifying noise. The gunshot sent a new wave of fear through the train. People dove for cover, hiding beneath their seats. But Chloe was trapped, out in the open. Her stiff leg braces and sore back made it impossible to move quickly or hide. She was a defenseless target, but she was not alone. Havoc was pure muscle and sharp instinct. The gunshot immediately triggered his training. The large shepherd did not run or even flinch. He moved to cover Chloe's legs, creating a living shield. A deep, threatening growl rumbled in his chest, a sound Chloe could feel in her own body. "Good boy," she whispered, her hands shaking as she clutched his fur. "Please stay with me." Just then, another person appeared in the crowded aisle. It was not Jackson. It was someone new. He had been sitting a few rows ahead the whole time, looking like any other passenger. A gray sweatshirt and a face mask hid who he was. This was Trevor, the man Simon's team sent to clean up any messes. The gunshot told him the original plan was ruined. His new job was to get the package. Trevor walked down the aisle, ignoring the frightened passengers. His eyes were locked on Chloe. He pulled a heavy, pointed metal bar from his pocket. He had to break open her titanium braces, take the drive, and disappear. "Sorry about this, kid," Trevor said quietly as he got closer. "This is going to hurt." He lifted the bar to bring it down on her knee, but the attack never came. Havoc flew through the air. He was a streak of black and tan fur. The dog ignored the weapon and clamped his strong jaws around Trevor's right arm. A loud snap of bone echoed in the car, followed by Trevor's scream of pain. The metal bar fell to the floor, but Havoc was not finished. Havoc knew exactly how to stop a threat. He used his own weight to twist and pull Trevor down into the tight space. The large dog pinned the screaming man to the floor. His huge paws were on Trevor's chest, and his teeth were still locked on the broken arm. He was not attacking. He was holding him down. The dog's smart eyes stared into Trevor's, and a low growl was all the warning needed. Chloe could only watch, her heart pounding. The sweet dog from just a moment ago was now a deadly protector. A shadow appeared over her, and Jackson was there. He took in the entire scene instantly. The tool on the floor, the man pinned by the dog, and Chloe, who was pale but safe. "Havoc, let go," Jackson commanded. The dog obeyed immediately. He stepped back but stayed close, watching the injured man. Jackson paid no attention to Trevor's cries. He took 2 plastic zip ties from his belt and secured the man's good arm to his seat. Jackson then gave Chloe his complete attention, kneeling beside her. "Chloe, you need to listen to me," he said, his voice now soft. "Are you hurt? Did he touch you?" "No," she whispered, as tears began to stream down her face. "Havoc, the dog saved me." "Good boy," Jackson said quietly, patting the shepherd's head for a second. Havoc wagged his tail once. Jackson's eyes moved to her legs, to the complicated braces made of carbon fiber and metal. "Chloe, I need your help," he said, his serious gaze meeting hers. "Think about your visit to the clinic in Manhattan. Did they take your braces to another room? Did they make any adjustments?" Chloe was confused by this strange question. Yes, Dr. Aries said they needed to be recalibrated. He took them to his lab for almost an hour. Jackson cursed quietly. He gently ran his fingers along the thickest part of her left brace. He felt a very small, nearly invisible line. The metal was not one solid piece. It was a cover. "It is a hidden compartment." "Chloe, they used you," Jackson said, his voice filled with anger. "Your doctor is part of something criminal. He made your braces into a way to smuggle things. It is probably secret information, stolen from the government or a large company. These men are here for what is inside your brace." Chloe looked down at her own legs with shock and horror. The very things that helped her walk had been turned against her. Can you get it out? She asked, her voice trembling. Just let them have it. I cannot do that, Jackson answered. They would get rid of us because we are witnesses. We are not giving up. We will get out of this. At that moment, the busted door at the front of the car was torn open with a loud crash. Jackson rose to his feet. A man he recognized as Simon Miller stepped into the car, holding a 9mm pistol. He was no longer pretending to be a passenger. He looked like a cornered animal, trying to grab his prize before the police could arrive. Havoc, Jackson whispered, his voice becoming hard as stone. Engage. The shepherd moved past Chloe and stood in the middle of the aisle, the fur on his back standing up. Jackson stood right behind his dog, his own gun aimed at Simon. This is over, Miller. Just walk away. Jackson's voice was firm and clear in the quiet car. Simon just laughed, but it was a cold, empty sound. You are a very long way from home, soldier boy. Do you really think you and your dog can stop me from taking what is mine? Jackson's stare grew even more intense. He is not just a dog, and I am not a soldier. His finger was steady on the trigger. I am a Navy SEAL. Small drops of sweat appeared on Simon Miller's forehead, shining in the emergency lights. He was a specialist in stealing company secrets, not a fighter ready to face an elite warrior and his trained dog. The tight aisle of the train had turned into a battleground that Jackson now controlled. What are you, some kind of hero? Simon sneered, but his gun was shaking slightly. You have no idea what is in that brace. It is a stolen military program. The people I work for will destroy this city to get it back. You are dying for some disabled girl you don't even know. I do not need to know her, Jackson said. His quiet voice was scarier than any shout. I only need to know you. Simon's eyes darted back and forth, looking for a way out. He knew he could not win a direct fight. Jackson's shot would be perfect. Jackson pointed his pistol right at Simon's chest. If Simon even thought about shooting, Jackson could fire 2 rounds into his heart before Simon could react. People who are desperate often make very bad choices. Simon suddenly lunged to his right. He grabbed a terrified woman who was hiding in her seat, a nurse named Sophia Higgins. Simon brutally pulled Sophia up and pushed his 9mm gun against her head, using her as a shield. Sophia screamed in terror, her hands flying up to her face. "Put the gun down!" Simon yelled, his confidence gone, replaced by the panic of a trapped animal. "Drop your weapon now, or she is dead." A wave of fear went through the other passengers. Chloe covered her mouth with her hands, crying for the innocent woman who was now a part of this nightmare. Jackson's face did not change. He did not lower his weapon. In a hostage situation, giving up your gun means giving up all control. Instead, his eyes moved up to the ceiling of the train, checking the angles and the light. Then, Jackson did something no one expected. He took his left hand off his pistol and reached into a large pocket of his pants. I said, "Drop it!" Simon screamed again, jamming the gun harder into Sophia's temple. "I will give you what you want," Jackson said, his voice completely calm. He flicked his wrist, sending a small, dark cylinder tumbling down the aisle. It made almost no sound on the thick carpet, rolling to a stop just 3 feet from Simon. Simon looked down, and his face turned white with fear, thinking it was a bomb. But this was something different. It was a special flashlight with a powerful strobe light. The second it stopped rolling, Jackson pressed a button in his pocket. A blinding, pulsing light of 3,000 lumens shot out, aimed right at Simon's eyes. In the dark train car, the explosion of light was overwhelming, stealing Simon's vision and making him stumble backward. Simon squeezed his eyes shut, turning his head away from the painful flash. That small moment of confusion lasted only 1.5 seconds, but for a former Navy SEAL and his trained dog, it was an eternity. Jackson could not shoot his weapon because Sophia was in the line of fire. Instead, he made a quiet, sharp click with his tongue. Havoc did not run straight down the open aisle, which would have made him an easy target. The 90-pound German Shepherd bounded over the seats, treating them like stepping stones. He moved like a ghost through the flashing chaos, coming at the gunman from the side. Before Simon could clear the bright spots from his vision, Havoc flew through the air from the top of a seat. The dog hit Simon from the side with incredible force. Havoc skillfully avoided the hostage, his strong jaws locking onto Simon's gun arm right on the elbow. The sheer force of the dog's attack threw Simon completely clear of Sophia. A pained, animal-like scream tore from Simon's throat as the bones in his arm shattered. The 9mm handgun bounced uselessly onto the floor. Havoc slammed Simon to the ground, pinning him with his heavy body while a deep, terrifying growl rumbled inches from his face. Sophia crumpled to the floor of the aisle, crying uncontrollably. Jackson covered the distance between them in 3 quick steps. He sent Simon's pistol skidding far underneath a seat with a kick, then grabbed the man by the front of his shirt. A single, hard knee to the chest forced all the air out of Simon's lungs. "Havoc, stand down!" Jackson ordered. The dog immediately let go of the ruined arm and took a step back, his smart eyes fixed on the man's throat. Jackson pulled out another set of strong zip ties, quickly securing Simon's hands behind him. The fight was finished. The train car was safe. A quiet calm settled over the passengers, the only sounds being soft sobs and the steady breathing of the German Shepherd. Jackson finally stood up, his own breath just a little bit quicker. He glanced down at Simon, who was wheezing on the floor, his face a pale mask of pure terror. Aegis Defense Systems needs to do a better job checking their new hires, Jackson said without warmth. He turned and walked back down the aisle as the flashing strobe light finally went dark. He knelt down beside Chloe again. She was trembling from head to toe, her eyes huge with a mix of fear and amazement. "It is finished," Jackson said quietly, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You are safe now, Chloe. No one will harm you." The rush of adrenaline left Chloe's body, and she was filled with a deep exhaustion and the sick feeling of how helpless she had been. She looked at the brace that held up her left leg. For years, she had relied on that strong frame of titanium and carbon fiber just to get around. Dr. Eris, a man she had trusted completely for 5 years, had secretly hollowed it out. He had used her to transport stolen government secrets. "He was always so nice to me," Chloe whispered, her voice full of pain. "Dr. Eris. He would pat my shoulder and say he was making the hinges stronger to help with my pain. He even got me coffee while I waited for him to finish." Jackson's jaw grew tight. He had witnessed the absolute worst of people in war zones all over the world, but a doctor using a disabled patient was a truly disgusting kind of evil. "People who deal in secrets eventually forget how to see people," Jackson explained in a soft voice. "All they can see are tools and ways to move things." He took out a special multi-tool from a pouch on his vest. "I have to remove that drive from your brace before the police get here. If the Federal Bureau of Investigation discovers it on you, they will hold you for weeks trying to prove you were part of this. We need to get that evidence away from you." Chloe nodded, her eyes desperate. "Please, just get it off me." Jackson got down on his knees. Havoc walked over and rested his big head on Chloe's good knee. His comforting weight helped calm her down. Jackson looked closely at the thick titanium bar on the side of her brace. He used a small light on his tool and found a seam that was almost impossible to see. The craftsmanship was amazing. The bar appeared to be one solid piece of metal, but a tiny screw was hidden under a thin piece of rubber. With careful, skilled movements, Jackson peeled back the rubber and put the tiny screwdriver into the slot. He turned it exactly 3 times. A small, 3-inch section of the metal bar popped open with a soft click. Inside the secret compartment, resting in protective foam, was a smooth black memory stick. It had no brand written on it, just a serial number etched by a laser and a small, faded red symbol that Jackson knew right away. It was a secret logo from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Jackson used the point of his knife to carefully lift the drive out of its hiding place. He held it in his fingers, staring at the little device that had nearly ended Chloe's life. "This little thing has military-level encryption," Jackson said to himself. He wrapped the drive in a small cloth and put it in a secure pocket on his vest. "I will give this directly to the federal agents when they arrive. I will tell them you were forced into this. Your name will not be listed as a suspect on any official document. I promise you that." "Thank you," Chloe managed to say, finally letting her body relax against the seat with relief. "I do not know how I could ever thank you. You and your amazing dog." "He is a good boy," Jackson said, and a small, real smile appeared on his face. "He could tell you were a person who deserved to be saved." Just then, the loud screech of power saws cutting metal echoed from the front of the train. Every passenger went completely still. Flashing red and blue lights started to sweep across the dirty tunnel walls outside. "That would be the New York Police Department emergency team," Jackson said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Listen to me, everyone. The police are coming in. Please make sure your hands are visible. Do not make any quick movements. We have 3 attackers tied up on the floor. Let the police handle everything from here." A powerful spotlight suddenly lit up the front of the car, making it hard to see anything. Officers in blue tactical uniforms stormed into the train car with their rifles raised. "New York Police, put your hands up! Nobody move!" the team leader yelled, his flashlight beam cutting through the air. Jackson did not move a muscle. He knew how confusing a police entry could be. He stood up slowly, with his empty hands held up near his shoulders. He moved slightly to stand in front of Havoc, protecting the dog from any nervous officers. "Friendly," Jackson shouted in a clear voice that police are trained to recognize. "I am a retired Navy Special Forces operator. My weapon is in its holster. I have 1 enemy down and 2 others in the aisle. The situation is under control." The officer in charge moved forward slowly. He kept his weapon pointed at Jackson's chest while his team secured Simon, Trevor, and Roman. "Sir, keep your hands where I can see them," the officer ordered. His eyes moved to the large German shepherd sitting patiently by Jackson's side. "And control your dog. He is a trained military police canine. He will not move unless I command him," Jackson replied calmly. The suspects pulled the emergency brake. They were trying to steal classified government intelligence. As police filled the train to arrest the criminals and help the passengers, a paramedic hurried over to Chloe. "Miss, have you been hurt?" the paramedic asked, shining a small light into her eyes. "I am all right," Chloe answered, her voice trembling but firm. "It is my back. I am not able to stand for a long time." "We are getting a special board to help you move," the medic promised, speaking into his radio for assistance. As they got ready to move her, Chloe looked up. Jackson was now surrounded by police officers, calmly showing his identification and passing a small drive to a federal agent who had just arrived. In the middle of all the noise and activity, knowing he had hours of questioning ahead, Jackson turned his head. His sharp gray eyes met hers from across the car. He offered her a single, respectful nod. Next to him, Havoc sat perfectly still and watchful. The beautiful German shepherd breathed out slowly, his golden brown eyes looking at Chloe one last time. Then Jackson gave a quiet command, and he and the dog disappeared into the flashing lights. Inside the interview room, the bright fluorescent lights of the Federal Bureau of Investigation building made a low, steady humming noise. Chloe held a rough gray blanket around her shoulders, a cup of cold coffee sitting forgotten on the metal table. It had been 9 hours since the train was rescued. 9 hours filled with medics, police lights, repeated questions, and this long interview with 2 tired federal agents. Special Agent Thomas Sterling, a man with exhaustion etched onto his face, slapped a thick folder on the table. "Miss Rollins, you need to understand how serious this is," he pressed, leaning closer. "The component in your leg brace is a new quantum targeting system. It was developed by Aegis Defense Systems for a secret government operation. The men on that train were not street thugs. They were professional corporate soldiers. They do not target random women unless that woman understands what she is carrying. I have told you all I know, Chloe answered, her voice sounding fragile but also firm with a new kind of strength. I went to my doctor, George Eris, for a normal adjustment on my brace. He took it to his workshop. I had a cup of tea in his waiting room. I knew nothing about any of this. Agent Sterling massaged the side of his tired head. Dr. Eris is a top surgeon with an office on Park Avenue, claiming he committed treason based on what a terrified train passenger says is a very serious accusation. Before Chloe could find the energy to argue any more, the heavy door clicked and swung open. Jackson Reynolds entered the room. He was no longer wearing his green tactical jacket. He now wore a simple black shirt that showed the strong muscles and faint scars on his arms. Havoc was not there with him, likely waiting in a K9 vehicle. A much older man in a charcoal suit followed Jackson inside. His identification badge displayed an incredibly high security clearance. "The woman is being truthful, Sterling," the man said in a flat tone. "I'm telling you to back down." Sterling instantly stood at attention. "Director, we were only confirming the details of what happened." "Those details are already confirmed," Jackson cut in, his cold gray eyes focused on the agent. "I personally took the drive from a secret slot in her titanium leg brace, a space that could only be made with special tools that were found inside Dr. Aries' laboratory. Miss Rollins is a victim who was taken advantage of, not someone who willingly helped. If you file charges against her or leak her identity to the news, you will have to answer to the Department of Defense." Jackson's eyes then moved to Chloe, and the icy expression on his face softened. "Are you doing all right?" "I want to go home," Chloe whispered, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I just really want to go back to Boston." "You will," Jackson assured her in a gentle voice. Chloe was finally escorted to a secure room where she could rest on a small bed. At that exact moment, Jackson's powerful contacts began to put the wheels of justice in motion. At 4:30 in the morning, 20 blocks away from that room, Dr. George Aries was desperately stuffing bearer bonds and encrypted hard drives into a leather bag. His lavish penthouse that looked out over Central Park was completely dark. The only light came from the electronic glow of a paper shredder in his office. Aries was drenched in sweat, his hands shaking. A message had appeared 30 minutes before on a disposable phone. It said, "The train mission failed. The target was present. Destroy everything. Run." He zipped the bag closed, his mind racing in a full-blown panic. He had been so full of himself, so confident. He had figured out years earlier that his patients with disabilities were the perfect, unsuspecting delivery people. Security staff at airports and train stations very rarely inspected medical equipment with any real care because they feared being sued for discrimination. Aries had received a 7-figure payment from a secret corporation to place the Aegis drive into Chloe's brace. It was supposed to be a very simple exchange in Boston. Aries swung the heavy bag up onto his shoulder and reached out for his office door. Before his hand could even wrap around the handle, the solid oak door flew inward, sending wood splinters all over the room. A steel ram, held by an FBI SWAT agent, had smashed the door right off its hinges. Before Aries had a chance to scream, 3 red laser dots appeared on his chest. Agents in full combat gear rushed into the office, their boots making crunching noises on the piles of shredded paper. "FBI! Show us your hands! Let go of the bag!" one agent shouted above the ringing in his own ears. Aris dropped the duffel bag like it was on fire and immediately fell to his knees. He interlocked his fingers behind his head and began to cry loudly. The highly respected surgeon, a man who treated his patients' lives like a game, was now just a pathetic mess on his own very expensive rug. From the darkness of the hallway, Agent Sterling walked in, taking in the entire scene. He looked down at the shaking doctor. Dr. George Aris, Sterling said, his voice filled with pure disgust. You are under arrest for the crimes of treason, espionage, and the reckless endangerment of a civilian. You have the right to remain silent. I strongly advise that you use it. The news of the raid was kept private for another 3 days. When the story was finally released, it was presented as a complicated case of financial crimes. The quantum drive, the gunman, and the former Navy SEAL with his canine partner were to remain government secrets, buried far down in classified government records. And the name Chloe Rollins never appeared in a single report. 6 months had gone by since that horrifying day inside the tunnel. The hot and humid New York summer had turned into a cool and beautiful Boston autumn. The leaves in the Boston Public Garden were a stunning combination of orange and red, which matched Chloe's thick wool coat. The sound of her crutches, a well-known clack and thump, was still a part of her life, but it sounded different now. It was faster, and it had a much more confident beat. After the arrest of Dr. Aris, the government had quietly given Chloe money from a special fund for victims. She used that money to meet with some of the best engineers at MIT. They designed for her a totally new set of braces. These were not built from heavy titanium, but from an extremely light 3D printed material made of carbon and Kevlar. The new braces were much, much lighter, which greatly eased the constant pain she felt in her back. Even more important, these braces were completely and totally her own. Chloe paused her walk near the swan boat pond, leaning on her crutches and letting out a small cloud of white mist. She was physically in better shape, but the emotional wounds from that day were still there. She would often scan crowds looking for men in suits, searching for those with cold eyes and guns they kept hidden. The fact that she was used, because of her disability, was a very difficult thing to live with. It does get easier, you know. The deep and steady voice came from her right side, and it mixed in so well with the sounds of the park that she did not hear him come near. Chloe spun around, and her breath caught in her throat. Jackson Reynolds was standing beside a park bench. He was wearing a thick, dark coat with its collar turned up, and his hands were pushed deep into his pockets. The faint scar on his jaw could be seen in the cold air. He looked exactly like he did on the train. Calm, sure of himself, and like a rock. But it was not seeing Jackson that made the tears come to Chloe's eyes. Sitting right there beside him, not paying any attention to the birds or the people walking by, was 90 pounds of solid muscle and intelligent amber eyes. Havoc, Chloe breathed, and a brilliant smile lit up her entire face. Jackson gave the dog a very slight nod. Go on, boy. Go say hello. Havoc did not charge forward. He walked over with a calm sort of dignity. The very large German shepherd walked up to Chloe, smelled her new, lightweight braces, and then did the exact same thing he had done on the train 6 months earlier. He leaned his warm, heavy body into her leg, let out a long, happy breath, and placed his huge chin right on her knee. Chloe let one of her crutches drop to the sidewalk with a clatter and buried her hand deep into the thick fur behind Havoc's ears. She closed her eyes and let the tears stream down her face as she remembered the feeling of his warmth during the most frightening moment of her entire life. I never imagined I would see you two again, Chloe said, her voice shaking just a little bit. She looked up at Jackson, who walked over to pick up her crutch. Agent Sterling told me that you had just vanished, that you were like a ghost. I was, Jackson said quietly, as he handed the crutch to her. I needed to handle some problems with Simon Miller's bosses, to make certain that their front company was taken apart and that nobody would ever come looking for the delivery person they lost. Chloe flinched at that word, but Jackson looked her straight in the eye. You are not a delivery person, Chloe. You never were, he said with complete certainty. Simon and Aries viewed your disability as a weakness they could use. Their big mistake was that they didn't see the whole person. They didn't see the person that I saw. What did you see? She asked, in a voice that was hardly a whisper, I saw a woman who lived with constant pain but still got on a busy train every single day and never gave up. I saw a woman who had a gun aimed 3 feet from her face and she did not break down. I saw a survivor. Jackson smiled, a true and rare smile that completely changed his serious expression. Havoc saw it as well. Dogs like him do not protect weak people. They protect their family. He knew that you were strong a long time before I did. Havoc made a quiet grunting sound and pushed his wet nose into the palm of Chloe's hand. Dr. Aries pleaded guilty, Chloe said, feeling a tremendous weight fall from her shoulders. 25 years in a federal prison, and no chance of getting out early. Good, Jackson nodded. I see you have some new gear, he said, motioning with his head toward her legs. MIT Engineering, Chloe answered with a proud smile. They are lighter, and they are stronger, with no secret compartments inside. The only secret is you, Jackson corrected her in a soft voice. Keep up the fight, Chloe. Do not let what they did make you afraid of this world. This world should be afraid of you. Jackson gave a quick, sharp whistle. Havoc immediately moved from Chloe's side and sat next to Jackson's leg, looking focused and well-trained. Stay safe, Chloe, Jackson said, as he started to turn around. Jackson! Hold on, Chloe called out. He stopped his turn and looked back at her. Will I see you again? She asked. Jackson looked at her, then at the incredible animal at his side. You know where to find us, he said. If you are ever on a train and need a friend, well, I know your name now. With a simple, quick wave, Jackson Reynolds and his powerful dog walked away. They vanished into the colorful scenery of the Boston Park, leaving Chloe feeling renewed, hopeful, and forever marked by her rescuer. The awful event on the train had redefined Chloe's existence, transforming her from a target into a fighter. She learned that the worst people are not always obvious. Sometimes they wear respectable clothes and betray your trust with a smile. But she also learned that true heroes show up in the most surprising forms. The quiet, scarred soldier and his loyal, sharp-eyed dog were living proof that fierce strength and deep kindness can come from the same heart. Jackson and Havoc offered Chloe more than just safety from harm. They destroyed the idea that she was helpless. From that moment forward, she would not walk with the heavy weight of her past. Instead, she would carry herself with the silent strength of her own inner resolve.